The flight attendant barely looked at her before stepping in her path. "This cabin is reserved for first-class passengers, ma'am." Her voice was firm but polite, the kind of tone used to redirect lost tourists or correct misbehaving children. Alina stood still, clutching her boarding pass. Her hair was pulled into a neat braid. She wore soft cotton slacks and a cream sweater, worn at the elbows, but clean and presentable. No designer purse, no flashy jewelry, just a modest canvas tote and quiet confidence. "I am in first class," she said gently, offering the boarding pass. The attendant glanced at it, her brow twitched. "Seat 1C?" Looked Alina up and down, then back at the pass. "This must be a mistake. I'll have to check with the desk." People in the boarding line behind Alina were already growing impatient.
"Tie."
Someone sighed loudly. Another whispered something that made the group near Gate 5 chuckle. Alina stepped aside without protest, allowing others to board while the attendant walked off briskly with her ticket. She waited in silence as one by one passengers strolled. PAST-suited businessmen, designer-clad influencers, a mother with a nanny in tow. No one met her eyes. She stood alone by the wall, next to a trash can and a vending machine with flickering lights. 10 minutes passed, then 15. No word. She did not raise her voice or make a scene. She just watched the sky shift to a deeper shade of blue beyond the runway glass. Then, the voice came over the intercom, calm, controlled, but unmistakably serious, "Ladies and gentlemen. Flight 7082 is currently delayed. We ask all passengers to remain near the boarding gate until further notice. Thank you for your patience." Rounder people groaned. Complaints stirred. A child began to cry. Lena did not flinch, because she knew that voice belonged to her husband. And the moment he learned how his wife had been treated, everything changed. Alina sat quietly near the window, watching the blinking lights on the tarmac as the minutes dragged by. Around her, confusion swirled. The flight crew looked uneasy. Passengers made calls, checked apps, refreshed updates, but no new information came. The gate agent who had taken her boarding pass earlier returned. This time, she was accompanied by a man in a dark blazer. He leaned in and spoke to her in a hushed tone, eyes flicking toward Alina as if she were a problem to be managed discreetly. "We are working to resolve an issue with the manifest," said vaguely to the group. "Please bear with us." Alina remained where she was, calm, composed, but inside her heart was beating faster now, not with fear. With anticipation, because she had sent a single message just minutes before. No explanation, no emotion. Just a line of text. "They asked me to step aside." She knew her husband would see it instantly. She knew he would not ignore it. *15. Minutes later, the airport staff at Gate 5 began to shift. Radios crackled. A man in a black suit with a discreet earpiece walked past the waiting passengers and made a direct line to the gate desk. He showed no badge, said no words, just handed over a card and nodded. The gate agent paled slightly and nodded. At that exact moment, a black SUV pulled up just outside the glass wall that looked over the tarmac. It was followed by another, and then a third. The energy changed. Tension replaced confusion. People stood. Murmurs filled the room. Alina finally stood, slowly brushing off the back of her pants as she picked up her tote. Walked calmly toward the gate, not because anyone called her, but because she could feel the shift. The quiet authority that now filled the air. As she approached the counter, the same flight attendant who had asked her to move before was now flustered, eyes darting between the manifest and the approaching security staff. "Ma'am," she stammered, "there has been an update." But Alina did not stop to listen. Behind her, the boarding screen went black for a moment. Then a new notice appeared. "This flight is now grounded. Please wait for further instructions." The passengers gasped. Confusion turned to worry and Alina. She just looked out at the SUV pulling up to the private runway entrance. He had arrived. The airport crew scrambled. Whispers echoed through the terminal like wildfire. Phones were raised in shaky hands, trying to capture footage of the black SUVs lining up near the private entrance. No one knew exactly what was happening, but everyone could feel that someone powerful had entered the scene. Alina remained still, standing just off to the side of the gate, as if she had known all along this moment would come. Two men in tailored suits emerged from the lead vehicle, scanning the area. Then a third stepped out taller, older, and commanding. In his presence, he wore a simple dark coat, no flashy logos, no bodyguards flanking him, just the quiet weight of someone who had not needed to prove himself in years. He walked with purpose, heading straight for the boarding gate. where the airline staff now stood frozen in anticipation. Passengers murmured among themselves, trying to place the face. Some already recognized him from business articles, financial magazines, and the rare charity gala photograph. Others were just beginning to connect the dots. "That is Henry Callahan," someone whispered. "The owner of Callahan Holdings? It's the guy who owns half the airline industry?" The woman beside her gasped. "Wait, that's Alina Callahan's husband?" Alina did not flinch. She did not wave. She simply watched him approach with a steady gaze, her arms folded lightly, her expression unreadable. Henry arrived at the counter and calmly addressed the senior flight supervisor. "There seems to have been a problem with my wife's boarding experience," he said in a voice that carried across the waiting area without effort. "I would like to speak to whoever made that decision." The staff exchanged panicked glances. "No one stepped forward, sir. We were just following protocol," the lead attendant stammered. There was some confusion about seating, and the system did not. Henry raised a hand gently, cutting her off. "You denied a confirmed first-class passenger," he said, his voice now quiet but unmistakably stern. "Because you assumed she did not belong there? I built this airline on the principle that class is not something you measure by handbags or heels. You will delay this flight. You will. Speak to every passenger here, and you will explain exactly why." The woman behind the counter opened her mouth, then closed it again. No one spoke. No one moved. Then, turning to Alina, Henry extended his hand, not for show, not to prove anything, but as if to say, "Come with me. You no longer need to stand where you are not welcomed." And with that, they walked away, past the gate, past the crowd, and toward the private runway where a different jet waited, one that would not ask for anyone's permission. As Alina and Henry stepped onto the private tarmac, the noise from the terminal faded behind them. The sleek black jet gleamed under the soft afternoon light, engines humming quietly in readiness. A small crew stood nearby, respectful and poised, waiting for their arrival without judgment, without question. This was a world that did not operate on appearances but on recognition of true identity. And Lena belonged here. Inside the plane, the atmosphere was calm and warm. Lena settled into her seat near the window, her hands resting on her lap, her posture composed. Henry sat across from her, studying her face. There was no anger in his eyes, only concern. He reached forward, gently placing a hand over hers. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "You should never have been treated that way. Not here, not anywhere." Alina gave a small, tired smile. "It is not the first time, and it will be the last," he replied, his voice firm now. "I am going to make sure of that." Back at the terminal, chaos continued to ripple through the airport. The original flight, still parked at the gate, was delayed indefinitely. Confused passengers demanded answers. Some recorded videos of the moment Henry had walked in, already being uploaded online under titles like "Billionaire Grounds," "Airline over Wife's Mistreatment and First-Class Discrimination Backfires." Within hours, the incident had become national news. Social media exploded with debate, support, outrage, and curiosity. Memes circulated. Commentators weighed in. Airline stock dipped. The company's PR team scrambled to respond, but Alina did not care for the noise. Somewhere above the clouds, with the city shrinking below them and silence wrapping around her like a blanket, she finally let herself breathe. It's not just because of the private jet or the luxury, but because she had been seen, truly seen, not just by the world, but by the one person who mattered most. And more than that, the world had been forced to see her too. The flight cruised smoothly at altitude, a soft hum beneath the floor as Alina stared out the window. The clouds stretched like cotton across the sky, serene and unbothered. For the first time in hours, she felt her shoulders relax. But her mind was still restless, reliving every word, every look, every assumption that had built that humiliating moment in the terminal. It was not just about being asked to leave. It was about being judged unworthy of a space, of comfort, of belonging, simply because she did not look like she fit in. Across from her, Henry opened his laptop. He was already drafting an internal company-wide message. He looked at her and asked, "Do you want to read this before I send it?" Lena shook her head gently. "Say what needs to be said. I need to hear it from you, not from me." He nodded. The message was short but powerful. He addressed not just the airline staff, but every executive, every stakeholder. "Yesterday, the woman you dismissed is my wife. Your future policies will treat every customer as though they are mine. Dignity is not earned by appearance, nor measured by wealth. It is owed to everyone. No exceptions." When he hit send, Elena's phone buzzed. Messages from friends, colleagues, even distant relatives. Some were shocked. Others were proud. A few apologized for times they had overlooked her, or joined the silence when she was ignored in rooms she clearly belonged in. The one that made her pause was a voice message from her younger cousin, Alia. "I saw the video. You made me believe again that it's okay to be quiet, to be different. You did not raise your voice, but you made the whole world listen." Lena closed her eyes. That was the moment it all shifted inside her. The incident at the airport had felt like a scar, but now it felt like a mirror the world had been forced to look into. Henry leaned back in his seat, watching her. "Do you want to say something publicly?" he asked. Alina opened her eyes slowly. "Not yet," she said. "Let them talk. Let them think. The lesson is louder when it comes in silence." She was no longer just the woman they overlooked. She was the symbol they would remember. The plane touched down with a soft jolt, the tires gripping the runway as the engines roared into reverse. Alina remained seated, calm and composed, while other passengers began gathering their bags, stealing glances in her direction. Something had changed during the flight, not just in how people looked at her, but in how she carried herself. She had walked onto that plane invisible in their eyes, but she was leaving it unforgettable. As they stepped off the aircraft, a sleek black car waited at the tarmac, doors held open by a chauffeur who greeted her with respectful warmth. Alina nodded politely and stepped inside, followed by Henry, who was still receiving phone calls from legal teams, publicists, and airline executives scrambling to manage the fallout. But Alina said nothing. She had said all she needed to just by existing with grace under pressure. The world had already heard the message loud and clear. By the time they reached the private villa overlooking the coastline, the story had gone viral. Videos from the lounge, the first-class confrontation, and Henry grounding the flight were now clipped, subtitled, and shared across every platform. But it was not just the drama that captivated people. It was her silence, her restraint, the quiet dignity of a woman who refused to shout and yet made an entire industry stop and listen. The airline released a statement that evening, full of carefully worded apologies and promises for training and reform. But what caught the world's attention even more was a simple picture posted later by Henry himself. Alina, sitting by the water at sunset, her bare feet in the sand, a mug of tea in her hands, and a caption that read, "The strongest voice in the room is not always the loudest." Within days, major networks requested interviews. Luxury brands reached out with offers to feature her in campaigns about quiet power and elegance. Publishing companies sent a draft proposal for her memoir, but Alina remained grounded. She turned most of it down. She did not want fame, she wanted change. What she accepted instead was an invitation to speak at an international leadership forum, not as someone's wife, but as someone who had shifted a conversation around worth and visibility. Her speech was simple. She told the room what it felt like to be dismissed because of appearances, and how easy it is to mistake silence for insignificance. Then she looked up, smiled gently, and said, "I do not need to raise my voice to prove I belong. I am already here." The room stood in thunderous applause. Back home, Alina went on with her life. She still wore simple clothes, still avoided the spotlight. But everywhere she went, lounges, stores, meetings, people treated her differently, with care, with thought, with curiosity, because now they wondered, who might this quiet woman be? And that was her quiet revolution. Not just about one moment, but a shift in how people saw others. She had reminded the world that the ones we ignore may be the ones who matter most. And sometimes all it takes is being asked to leave for the world to realize someone was never supposed to be left out at all.